evening, and welcome to another episode of Microsoft Teams Rooms Tech Talk. Jimmy, great to see you again, buddy.
Great to see you again, Michelle. You didn't have the pleasure, but this weekend we celebrated a holiday for all of us in the U.S. Matthew, I know you celebrated as well, so it was a good weekend. Hope everybody on the call also had a good weekend. Hope you had a great weekend. It was the end of our fiscal year last week too.
Yeah,
Big
and
weekend.
and what a year it has been, right? It's been an amazing year. We learned so much, saw so many great things. I think we have a great show today. We have Matthew from the Hive on. Before we get into that, let's start with shouting a few people out, Jimmy. We see Raoul from Almere, which is a small city in the Netherlands. We see
Glad you pronounced it because I didn't.
Almere. You can do it. You can do it. We have Dublin here. I see Hollywood, which is actually Hilversum, which is also a city in the Netherlands. We have June from Chicago. Thanks everybody for joining. I see Greg Jeffries in here. Greg, great to have you here. I know you're gonna have a bunch of questions for Matthew, so that's I think it's gonna be a lot of fun. Jimmy, how about we start with a little surprise? Is that okay?
We were talking about this before we actually came on, and I think it's great news, and I think everybody's going to be excited about this.
Yeah, so for the folks that live in Europe, we have something special. And US and APJ will follow hopefully soon. But we're going to start with Europe. You've probably seen the Teams Rooms technical badge. You passed it, right, Jimmy?
I passed it. I made some of the
Yep.
questions.
Yeah, we
I
made the
failed the
question, so it
first
was
time.
easy
I
for
made
us.
the questions and I failed the first time, but I did pass it. So
So for the folks that are watching that are currently in Europe, we have something special. If you have passed both the sales badge and the technical badge, I would like for you to make a screenshot of this page on Expert Zone and send it to me on LinkedIn. Sounds a bit clunky. We're still waiting for the official sign up page, but we wanted to give this to you now during the show. So if you have both the sales badge and the technical badge, take a screenshot of the Expert Zone site that shows that you have both badges. Send it to me on LinkedIn. I'm going to send you a link and we're going to have a very special gift for you. You're going to be the first ones. So be quick. We only have limited quantities. I'm not going to tell you what it is yet, but you know when you send me the DM. So take a screenshot here of this page, send it to me on LinkedIn. I'll send you a link, and then you'll be able to claim a little gift that we have for you. And again, we're going to start with Europe, and then APJ and the US will follow soon.
one more reason to go get your badge. 100%,
One
right?
more reason. Yeah, yeah. Hey, London's in the house. Graham, good to have you. We're here. Harold, always on the show. Good to have you here from Vienna. Marin, congratulations on the new role. Good to have you here as well. Matthew, welcome to the chaos that we call Teams Rooms Tech Talk.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to be here. Thanks for inviting me, guys.
Could you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do in Microsoft, and then we'll talk about this wonderful building that you're working on.
Yeah. Yeah. So officially, I'm a program manager. I'm principal program manager at Microsoft, and my role is to oversee our global AV standards. But part of that, the real fun part of my job is that um, I work at and run the engineering team at the Hive, and the Hive is our playground. It's a 20,000 square foot facility in Redmond, off campus, where we can build full scale, working, functional. There's some images of it there. Yeah, full scale functioning mock-ups of meeting rooms, and not just meeting rooms, but all sorts of connected spaces. So a lot of our stock in trade is meeting rooms, of course, but we do more, sort of more innovative spaces. Right now, we're working on a new type of space that doesn't even exist at Microsoft right now, and trying to figure out how to put technology into it in completely different ways with completely different projection system and sound system and that sort of thing. And notably, it's where a lot of our ideas around connected rooms that are being implemented today, this coming fiscal year at Microsoft, where they kind of came to life. You
Yeah.
can see there that we work, we work with both high technology and low technology. The fastest way sometimes is to just to think storm stuff out of cardboard and tape, and like plywood and whatever it takes. We've got it there in a way that we can't really do on campus normally.
And Matthew, saying that you are in charge of AV standards across Microsoft, that is a tremendous amount of responsibility just because of the amount of shared spaces that we have. And like you
Yeah.
said, these spaces are not always standard of, oh, this is the kind of table that you have. This is the kind of thing that you have. We're really looking at these spaces and saying, how can we have better meetings? And I think that's where the Hive shines, right?
Yeah. Yeah, before the pandemic, it was a fair amount of work already because we have at Microsoft, we have 13,000 connected meeting spaces. So that includes all different flavors of our conference rooms and anywhere where people might meet and be productive. So that was like the state before the pandemic. When the pandemic hit, everything shut down. And we all went to work differently from home, from cafes or wherever we were able to get out to. And now we've sort of restarted this enormous, you know, like ocean liner,
Yeah.
and we're trying to get it going again. And that in itself is challenging, just getting those rooms up and running again. But the thing is, the rules have really changed. The balance of influence in a room has changed. The way that we connect with each other, the hunger that some of us have to reconnect, has sort of changed the stakes. And some of us, the benefits of working from home for these 2 years have really stuck, and a lot of folks want to keep doing that, and we want to make that okay, but we want to make sure that all the meetings really feel comfortable and natural for everybody. And you can't do that with the way that some of those spaces were designed originally. And so we're working as quickly as we can on, number one, redefining what that's going to look like. And there's a lot of great stuff out there in the market. All of our OEM partners are really doing the same thing, and one of the things that we can do at the Hive is we can take the best of the breed, best of the crop, and put it together in ways that really works well for Microsoft.
And I think one of the interesting things, Michelle, if I jump in here, we were speaking before we came here live and everything about some of the challenges, some things that you guys want to do. They're just not built yet. It's the
Yeah.
kind of thing where you're there at the Hive and you're really inventing, like I said, the better way to work. And sometimes that means, hey, we gotta reinvent or look at the tools that we have and figure out a way to do it. I mean, I love the part of the video where you guys are making furniture out of cardboard. That kind of thing is really showing, while a lot of people think like, oh, this was invented somewhere and then they came up with this and this is
Right.
an idea from here. You guys really are sort of looking at it and saying, we know there's a better way to do this. So,
Yeah.
take us through that step that you did to actually get those front row rooms out and design them the way that a lot of people are seeing in the field right now.
Yeah. One of the things that we do differently is we start with the experience, and then we work our way towards the technology from the experience. So I call it phygital design. And I actually borrowed that term from my past before I came to Microsoft. I used to develop aircraft interiors, and it's different. It's no longer a 20-foot by 100-foot aluminum tube, but if you think about it, it's putting people into a physical space where they have a physical experience, but they also have, increasingly with modern aircraft, a digital experience. And I kind of brought that thinking to the Hive, and I really I enjoy being able to do that. So we start with thinking about like what is it that we want out of that space when we meet, right? At the high level, like why do we meet? Why are we having this meeting in the first place? What are we trying to accomplish? And then we kind of go into what is the technology that's necessary to achieve that in that particular space. So we really think of the four physical walls, or five, or however many walls you have to have, or sometimes no physical walls, um, to integrate it together with the equipment. And so this room that you're showing here in the picture, what we internally call our enhanced meeting room, our EMR. I'll use that shortcut so everybody knows what I'm talking about. That's a perfect example of that. This room represents kind of a call to action for us. When in the midst of the pandemic, we said, "Oh my gosh, everything is going to change. We really need to think 3 steps forward, put something out there that shakes up the status quo and starts to point at how we might be meeting in the future." And this was the result of that. And this space that you're seeing here, this rendering, is actually like the fourth or the fifth generation of that space. Originally, when we built this over in one of our buildings, we took sort of the the quickest, but in some ways the most expensive approach to doing this. We started with 2 projectors mounted overhead, synchronized together to create that super wide image. Um, we started with whatever tables we could scrounge up because we didn't have a custom curved table. We started with the camera attached to the wall. And there's all very good reasons why we've moved away from that, but it took like 4 or 5 tries of building it over and over again, scrapping it, building it, scrapping it, testing it, building it, scrapping it, before we got to this iteration. But if you look at the way that this is designed, it really depends on the room being oriented a certain way, on the furniture being oriented a certain way, a certain number of users together with the technologies. This is kind of what I'm talking about. This is a real phygital integration here.
Yeah, and I love the use of our OEM partners, Jabra, who have that 180-degree camera that actually allows that to be done. And I think when we were talking before, one of the things that didn't exist was that mount. You
Yeah.
guys needed to
That's
actually build that and invent that for us.
Yeah,
before
that's
you
a
tell
that's
that
a
story, Matthew. Before you tell,
yeah.
because that's an amazing story, by the way. So we'll get
Yeah.
to it. But how do you get? Because I don't want to skip over this part. How do you
Yeah.
get from iteration 1 to iteration 2 to then 3? Is it cost? How do you make it practical for everybody? Is it design? Is it standards? What made you move between these different versions of this ROM?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's deployment friction. It doesn't. It's not that hard to build one of something. I mean, as long as you have the money, right? So the cost to build V1 of this room was well into the 6 figures because we were working with an existing room where there was some wiring in the floor. We had to X-ray the floor. X-raying a floor costs $50,000, just in case anyone's interested. You don't want to have to do that. Um, and so it was really difficult. And so what's involved in actually getting this from that first version is figuring out how to value engineer it. And that's one of the things that we love to do at the Hive, because we can tear stuff down, we can figure out how to break it, we can figure out then how to fix it after it's broken. Um, and this room went through several processes of kind of value engineering it. So one of the things that we discovered is that mounting 2 projectors from the ceiling overhead it's very site dependent. And depending on how high that actual ceiling above the subceiling is, or above the suspended ceiling is, your projectors will move a little bit, and you get that line in the middle, and there's synchronization issues and all sorts of stuff like that. And um, when you're doing it once, that's fine, but across a portfolio the size of ours, if you have to do it several hundred or several thousand times, the experience is going to be inconsistent. And what we wanted was a really consistent experience, not just for our room users, but also for our integrators. We want our partners to all be successful in putting these in so they can do them quickly, so they can do them over and over again. We don't want to get callbacks and that sort of thing. And so we ultimately we leaned on our projector manufacturers a little bit, and we got some fantastic devices in at the Hive to test, and we landed on a 21:9 aspect ratio image that
Yeah.
that we could put on that big beautiful screen. And we took the projectors off the ceiling, and the the origin story of that, of the way that we did it now was one of my colleagues over a weekend. I think one of my colleagues, Sam, he scrounged some like a shelf or some piece of IKEA furniture from his mother-in-law's house, and brought it over and started.
Mother-in-law. That's the funniest part.
Mother-in-law, yeah, from his mother-in-law's house, and brought it in, and like I'm looking at this thing on Monday, and it's covered in tape, and it's got holes in it, and there's a camera. Literally, the jobber is literally zip tied to it. And we turned it on, and like we all had to walk really carefully around it, but it worked. It actually worked. And the reason that we did that was we wanted this experience where everybody in front row, you see those images there, everybody in front row is more or less at eye level with
Right.
the people in the room. And it's relatively easy to do with the screen, but then you also basically, you want the camera really located where everybody's eyeballs are. And we went so far as to cut a hole in the screen and put the camera behind the screen, so there was a little
Yeah.
hole left, because we wanted that eye gaze to be just right. And yeah, the thing with the hole didn't work so well, but what we discovered was that if we pull the camera forward about 3 feet, you can actually mount it slightly higher than the bottom edge of the screen. So that camera, the lens is actually 6 inches above the bottom edge of the screen, and yet because of where you're sitting, it doesn't block, because you're looking. The typical person is looking slightly down, especially if they have an adjustable chair. And so by bringing it forward, we accomplished two things. We got our eye gaze where we wanted to, but we also consolidated all of the devices, all the technology in that integrated mother-in-law stand. So we didn't have to mount anything to the wall, which is really nice, because now all you need to do is run a Cat5 and a power cable out to that stand. And so then we said, all right, we got this thing. It's made out of, IKEA flake board. We obviously got to do better
Sticks
than
and wood,
this.
right?
Yeah, exactly. So we took some pictures of it, and we got in touch with our one of our partners, Heckler, that were like, yeah, we'll build that for you, no problem. And they built their version of it, and went through a couple of iterations, and they sent it to us, and we're like, this is great. And now they offer it on their website for sale. We don't have
Wow,
any IP around it, so we just offer it to customers.
that's a cool story. Shall we
Yeah,
jump into a couple of questions before we move on? So
yeah.
Greg Jeffries is asking a question. How much are you going to develop? Two questions actually. How much are you going to develop the camera positioned in free space?
Yeah. By free space, I assume, Greg, that you're talking about a camera that is not attached to the wall. Um, Part of that really depends on how the room is oriented. One of the reasons that we can do that here is because that curved table there kind of creates a D-shaped void where we can put things. One of the challenges of positioning a camera in free space is that it in other orientations can present an obstruction, like an
Hmm.
accessibility obstruction. In this case, it doesn't. There's enough room there that somebody can travel through. We also think about things like the cleaning crews that have to come in at night to vacuum. You don't want to put something where somebody can bump into it. So it really depends on the room and how it's oriented, but it's always on the table. And not literally, the camera is not always on the table. The idea to develop something different than a wall mount is always on the table. We don't constrain ourselves to just a wall mount.
Right. Marin is asking, why do you have to X-ray the floor, especially if it costs $50,000?
Yeah, the reason was it's not a normal part. It was one of the pain points. We just happened to have a room come available that we were able to work in, and that room had cables running through. It had conduit in the floor, and we had to put an outlet in the floor. And if you're going to drill the concrete, you have to make sure you're not going to drill into a high voltage power cable. So it was kind of a one-off, but it's like one of those things that you run into, and then you go, okay, now when we go to operationalize this idea, we need to take that into account. So it was actually a valuable lesson about what you can assume and what you can't assume. about a space.
And I think
Okay.
that's what our AV partners go through all the time is, okay,
Yeah.
they want this room, for their customers, but they're actually the ones that are setting it up and going through that whole thing about how can we do this. And that's where
Yeah.
Michelle, I always do it on my speeches, the good, better, best scenario always comes from is
Hmm.
good, meaning that I'm just going to take what exists and I'm going to work with it. Better, okay, maybe I'll do some furniture and some arranging, but the best goes with I'm going to x-ray the floor. I'm going to make sure that everything sort of goes through and I can fit this room in. So I think that's where a lot of our partners actually have a really, really good amount of experience in doing this.
Yeah. I think we lost Matthew.
I think we lost Matthew. Matthew
Yep.
will be back, but I think like we were talking about with Matthew a little bit before too, having the ability to actually take this and roll this out to the thousands and thousands of conference rooms. I think that's where we see value, not only from you guys in the Hive and taking the experience that you've got and applying it to all of the rooms of Microsoft, but our partners understanding what you did and how you got to these conclusions
Yeah.
and taking that lesson and sort of rolling out to our end customers as well.
Yeah. It's actually you. Hold on. I'm just going to readjust my microphone here. Can you guys? Yeah. Okay.
I think you're
All right.
good.
Cool.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah. You raise a really good point, and one of the things that we always just struggle to balance, we try to end up on the right side of this balance, is the difference between communicating standards and the difference and intent, right? So if we communicate intent, what we're basically saying to our partners and to construction sites and anyone in the stakeholder chain is, here's what we want to achieve in the room. Here's the experience that we want, but it leaves a little bit of wiggle room for how to do it, right? So we don't necessarily want to say you have to have an outlet in the floor where you're going to hit a pretension cable or you're going to hit power. But the intent here is we want nothing to trip over, so find a way to do it. But that you have to have really good trusted partnerships to know that in the field they're going to figure out a way. The easier way to do it is just to give a list of specifications. But sometimes to achieve that specification costs more money and more time when you didn't really need it. So a good example of that is screens. Can I go off on a little tangent here?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so a good example of that is screens, right? So I get a lot of questions like, why is it a single screen? Why is it a 21:9 screen? Why aren't we doing
We did too, and one came in. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Matt Black is
Why aren't
actually saying, yeah.
why aren't we doing two displays, right? You
Yeah.
guys used to do two displays. That's easy to do, right? And so rather than specifying a screen, the reality is that when we, even in our internal deployments, when we are working with field projects, something like 40% of our spaces need some sort of a deviation. And we actually, at the Hive, we actually have a deviation process where work projects submit the situation and we look at it and we say, okay, yeah, you're supposed to use this, but why don't you use this instead? And often it comes down to displays. The display is the single largest component in the room. And you get into situations like there's a thermostat in the middle of the wall, or there's a door, or there's a window and it's uncontrolled light, and you need to use emissive instead of reflective. And so what we've done is we've kind of chunked out the displays and we've said, look, the intent in the room is to give you a super wide canvas, right? We just call it a canvas at this point. We want a canvas for teams. And the reason we want the 21:9 is because it gives you a little extra room in the side for chat and raised hands, and it also the width actually then give you an extra one extra frame for front row. But there's multiple ways to achieve this, right? The most cost-effective way is to do it with projection. And so if you can do it with projection, do it with projection. If you can't do it with projection, there's some display options available. There's some emissive displays. And if you can't do it with 21:9, do it with 16:9, but just think about your width. And your width is going to be governed in some cases by your table. We've got rooms where the table's pushed all the way up against the wall, and so you don't want a display that's wider than the table because people are going to have to, they can't see out of their ear. And then the third option is dual displays. So we sort of give a good, better, best, or a best, better, good in that order, uh, statement of intent, and we let the field figure it out. And all the devices, all the other devices in the room will work with any of those combinations. The reason that we put dual displays last is just because then the content has to choose one side or the other often.
Mhm.
And when you're in a non-hybrid meeting, when you're in an all in-room meeting, one of the displays isn't used, or it mirrors the content. So it's not a great use of pixels. Um, so we're doing that with this one element, and we sort of hope to nudge a little bit closer to away from like specifications and more towards design intent. I think it speeds up the process a little bit more.
Mm. We have a question from an anonymous LinkedIn user.
Yeah,
Where's the compute in this scenario? Let me see if I can pull up the picture again. Yeah. So where's the compute in this setup?
so it's all in the heckler stand. The heckler stand is 2 stories. The first story is the compute and the any of the other sort of black box devices that have to go into that room.
Mhm.
And then the second story is the projector, and it has a periscope lens. It does a 180 onto the screen, and then you have that arm that comes up that holds the P50.
Okay, got you.
Yeah,
We have Harold here, and Harold is a big audio fanatic. We have him on every episode. There's always an audio question coming in from him. And
yeah,
this question, we get some more info about the audio of this enhanced meeting room.
yeah. So believe it or not, we run the audio through the P50. Everything runs through that device. Um, when we built the room originally in V1 or V2 or something like that, a couple of early versions, we had Sennheiser ceiling tile mic. We tried it out with various other types of mics, mics and speakers in the ceiling. Ultimately, what we did is we went back to the built-in audio in the Jabra. First of all, it's included, right, when you buy the device. But what that does is, for spaces where we are doing a retrofit, where we're retrofitting this room into another one, the costs of doing that are really high. And because you have to turn the room 90 degrees. And so what we
Hmm.
wanted to do was to help offset that by making sure that we minimize the cost for some of the features like audio. And we find that with the right acoustic treatments in that room, which also work with real estate to make sure that they're there, that the audio is pretty good with the built-in.
Yeah,
Impressive.
I was really impressed with the way that Jabra Audio does as well. I think
Yeah,
it's a great device, and to your point, if you're doing one room, I think that cost of the integrated audio with the Sennheiser ceiling tiles, the Shure DSPs, the
right.
QSC DSPs, the biamps, that's great to do the one-off room and everything else. But you guys are
Yep,
really looking at it and saying, how do we scale across all of Microsoft, and how do we do this? And to the point of a
yep,
lot of the questions that are coming in, Michelle, that's where our partners are looking at too, is saying, all right, I don't want to just do that one room. We can do that one room all day long. And to your point, there's going to be added costs if you are just looking at doing this for one room. But if
right.
you're looking at, I want to take this and I want to enterprise this and I want to get as many rooms as I can across this, that's where you're going to really look at value and say, all right, where am I getting the best value for what I'm spending my money on right now?
Yeah, yeah. The hero in that room is really that display, and that
Hmm.
projector. I think the projector is about 5 grand, and the lens alone is another 5 grand. So that's
Yeah.
that's 10 grand just for the imaging, and that's totally worth it, because you got to get that light up on that wall, and you got to get that huge, like, billboard size image. So that works really well. And we found that adding the extra cost of the component audio in that room just didn't give you the pop that you got from that particular investment. So we'd rather shift the money into that investment. We do have executive spaces that we do, where we can add Um, you can switch out components a little bit if we need, if we need the sound to be really just,
That high end.
you know,
Yeah.
10,
Yeah.
10.5 out of 10.
Yeah.
Then we'll go to component audio, but we find that we don't need to very much.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's take a couple of more questions. Let me see. Let me see. Another one from Bart with front row. If you're not presenting the result is a 16 by 9 blank black box in the middle of your display, any plans to enable an auto switch between traditional teams layout and front row layouts when shifting from presenting to not presenting?
Right, right. So that's more of a question for the Teams
Greg.
team. I know that. Yeah, yeah. I know that. Have you had him on the show?
No,
And
it's funny. Every episode, there's always a question that Greg should answer. So we're trying to get him
Yeah,
on. We'll get him
yeah.
eventually, but
I think I do know some of these things. I think with front row, they are going to do some layout changes. Ilya's spoken about this publicly, where they're going to change that the bottom gallery view, and you're going to have a choice of large, small, medium, whatever it's going to be.
Right.
And you're going to have some choices because they did want to look at content a little bit larger. They did want to look at the left and right hand, the loop components a little bit differently. So there are changes that are coming that will be more configurable. I think one of the challenges that the product group has, Matthew, as well, is the idea they don't want to make conference rooms hard again. And
Yep.
sometimes those interfaces and those things that we give for, oh, you want to configure this, that goes back to that making the conference room hard again. And I think that's where Teams rooms and the Hive and things that everybody does on the product group side, on the Hive side, on all the different spaces that we live in here at Microsoft, let's make it easy. We don't want to
Yeah.
make it hard for users again.
Absolutely. It's funny that you mentioned that, because just as a little bit of a tangent, I worked on a prototype of a flexible space. We built it at the Hive, and it basically was an open space with a bunch of furniture that you can set up. And like, we heard employees were asking for the ability to have flexibility, and what we discovered was flexibility is something everybody wants until you give it to them.
So
And
you give
then,
it to them.
yeah.
like, the last thing that they want to do is configure and set up a conference room 3 minutes before the meeting. And that sort of north star of keeping things simple. It's a single button. You start the meeting, you don't have to think about it. It all goes back to, what is the experience that you want? Do you want to walk away from that room feeling like you had to turn into a tech expert in order to have the meeting? Or do you want to walk away from the room, in a way, kind of forgetting about it? Like,
Mhm.
having somebody walk away and forget about the room is a real compliment to
I
us.
had a
Yeah.
meeting. That's yeah,
Yeah,
I say
I
this all
had a
the
meeting.
time.
yeah,
It's
Yeah,
weird for
not
us nerds, and I always say nerds is a great compliment. I'm one
yeah,
myself. It's
yeah,
weird for us nerds to say it's not about the technology. It
yeah,
is. It is about empowering every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. Right? So you
yeah,
do not have
100%.
to think about tech. It just happens.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in sort of more beyond, like the tech, in what goes on in the room and how we connect. One of the things, like, we spent a lot of time with the eye gaze thing, like having everybody at the eye level. If you're a movie fan like I am, you realize how cinematography sort of enters into
Yep.
the influence here.
Hmm.
When we want to connect with a character, the camera is often at eye level, at a human level. And that's called that's I call that participation in the meeting. When we want to observe, the camera is often up a little high, and I call that observation in the meeting. And you want to be a participant, not an observer. And so, little detail like that is actually, it's actually kind of important, because it affects how you are building trust, and sort of
Hmm.
establishing common ground with people in the room. And that's really not about the technology so much. It's about how you envision the mind state of the person who's calling in, or the person in the room who's speaking to somebody who's called in.
Yeah. What was your response, Matthew? So we released the video from the Hive. What, four
Yeah,
weeks ago now? 5 weeks maybe.
yeah.
Um, Jimmy and I, we can talk a little bit about what we heard after that video. But what was your how surprised were you with the feedback that we received from that video? And what did you see
Yeah,
happening in the field?
you're talking about the video
That the one that we just
that you
showed.
showed a little clip of, right,
Yeah,
earlier on, that was running.
yeah,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, the biggest response that we got was from our customers, from Microsoft customers, who saw it and they were like, "Oh my God, you guys have a secret place
You guys have an
where
R&D place? Oh
yeah,
no.
you have an R&D facility. You're figuring this out. We're trying to figure this out.
Yeah.
Was it? Yeah.
Can you show us? Can you show us how to do it?
Yeah.
And my schedule suddenly went from like working with my engineering team
Yeah.
to talking with customers and having customer engagements. I think it's a lot of fun. It goes both ways, right? So for me, it's a chance to share what we've done, and I'm very passionate about it. But it's also a chance to really hear the the pain that customers are going through, and I'm amazed. I mean, these
Yeah.
I'm not going to name any names, but big companies with a lot of um, resources to throw things are encountering the same pain that we are. And
Hmm.
one of the things that being in an engineering facility I can do is I'm not in sales mode, right? And so I can really share our pain very honestly and say this is what we've nailed. Like we got this. This works really well. This is what we can recommend to you. This is what we're working on right now. That's a real problem, and it's sticky, and we're not sure how to do it. But here's how we're approaching it. Here's what we think is going to work. Here's a mock-up. You can try it out. And that was the main thing. Was it turned my view external and super eye-opening.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think you're right. I think the struggles that we have here at Microsoft are the struggles that most companies will have as well, and that's why we're doing these sort of things to go through. One customer that I actually visited not too long ago, they're a Fortune 500 company, but they still schedule their rooms with pen and paper.
Mm,
Wow.
That's not something that's uncommon. You look at
yeah,
some of
Hmm.
the things that we do here at Microsoft to schedule our rooms and to the room finder and all of the
yeah,
technology that we have. Sometimes getting those things up and running and just solving that simple how do I schedule a room problem is something that really the customers sort of have to open their eyes to.
yeah, yeah. And even when we've solved that problem, now we have the added problem of we've scheduled the room. How do we know who's
Now what?
coming?
Yeah.
How? Right? I just scheduled a room that can hold 20 people. Are 3 people going to show up and
Hmm.
17 are going to be online, or is it going to be the opposite? And am I going to be, as a result, this is my pet peeve, is those meetings where you have the view of a diving board basically, and you got 3 people sitting at the end of it,
Yeah.
like little heads floating at the end of the table.
And Michelle, one of the feedback that I had from the video, every partner wants to go visit the Hive. And
Yes.
Matthew, I think you could share because I've been there. Sometimes
Yeah,
it's the most boring place you'll ever see because it tested like an HDMI switcher. It's not
yeah,
all glitz and glamour there all the time, right?
right, right. Yeah, I think that for customers, what they see when they walk in is they see a path to overcoming some of the obstacles that they may have in either internally or with their entire partner, stakeholder chain,
Hmm.
where they're getting conflicting information from one place to another
Yeah.
place and they're not sure because everybody's sort of trying to figure it out, right? One of the huge advantages that we have at Microsoft is that um, we develop a lot of technology and teams. Obviously, we own that. We are a massive influencer in the industry, and we are also customer zero. I really can't think of many other companies that do all three of those things at once. And so as a result, when you sort of put all that together in a place like the Hive, where you can clear a lot of obstacles, and we can, like, I mean, literally, we can rip the sheetrock off the back of a wall, and we don't have to worry about it being in an actual campus space where people are going to
Hmm.
hurt themselves. Because we can do that, and we can do that quickly, and we can iterate quickly. I think that customers see that as sort of a refreshing thing, and they go, "Okay, show us how you're doing this. Show us the next step. The next step. How did you do this? How did you do that? What are you thinking about here?" Right? It just leapfrogs them ahead of their own sort of traditional processes if they're not set up for that.
Yeah. And
For
one
us,
of
it's
the
super fun to go into some of these customers and partners and see them replicate what you've actually created in the Hive. I think I shared a
Yeah.
picture with you the other day, Matthew, of one of our partners in Dubai that looked at that video and said, this is the room that we're going to build. And they built that
Yeah,
exact same room,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because they were so impressed by it and inspired by it. And we're now seeing so many customers that are starting to build these rooms and build on top of the vision that we have.
Yeah, I
And
saw that. And even
they're
though it wasn't
building
exactly
iteration 5. Iteration, it's not the first
Yeah.
try. That's the key.
Mm-mm. Yeah.
right, right. Yeah, even though that room wasn't exactly to the same spec, I loved the idea that somebody took it and sort of made it their own. Because ultimately, are you delivering the experience that you want there? And the experience in that room is a better, closer, tighter connection to your remote colleagues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's take a few more questions before we wrap this up. There are quite a few questions around projectors.
Yeah.
So Joe is asking single or dual projectors.
Yeah, so we standardize around single projectors. There's a handful on the market right now that will do a 21:9 image really nicely. Nothing wrong with dual projectors in principle, but what we found was that if you do dual 16:9 projectors, then you're getting a 32:9 image overall, but you're not really using it very effectively because Teams does not have a 32:9 layout right now.
Hmm.
And what'll happen is that center area for content will be stretched. So even in the best case scenario, you'll end up letterboxed, vertically letterboxed. Um, and then you also have the alignment situation. And so yeah, we can get there's edge blending and that sort of thing, but it means a guy up on a ladder turning a wrench trying to get those things perfectly set up. And if you happen to be in a seismic zone, like we are in Puget Sound, or even in a building that moves a little bit, those things eventually they get out of whack. So it's just a lot
Yeah.
easier with a single.
Yeah. And then if you use projectors, Jeroen is asking, where do you project the image on? Is the blank white wall or China ALR screen already?
Yeah, we use ALR screens. The white walls are we did that previously, but you just don't get the pop,
They're
and
dull.
then you're
Yeah.
also then
Yeah.
relying on a non-engineered surface, so you get a little bit of distortion there. The other thing about that is it lets you what we did in the enhanced meeting room is we sort of framed out that area almost like a cinema screen. It just makes the experience a little more special, but it also gives you a place to intentionally put acoustic materials.
Good stuff. Let me see if there's one
Yep.
more, maybe. Da-da-da-da-da-da. I think this is an interesting one from Chico. If you listen to customers, how do you think the pandemic has affected the refresh cycle of the room? Do you think it's same, longer, or shorter? And then I'll add a question:
Yep.
if customers are looking at this stream or looking at the videos, images, whatever, and they're saying we want this, where did they start? So
Yeah.
refresh cycles, any differences? And then if a customer saying we want to start, where do they start?
Yeah. Yeah. So actually, let me go. Well, let me take the first part of the question. So um, it's not as simple as same, longer, shorter. What we have found was that there are devices in the room that are kind of evergreen, where we don't really have to change the refresh cycle that much at all. We're on typically we try to run between a 3 and a 5 year refresh, um, and so we have some devices that are not that can kind of maintain that lifespan. However, there's a lot of volatility right now. I don't know if volatility is the right word, but there's a lot of change, a lot of very fast evolution in the AI camera field.
Mm,
And the cameras that are on the market right now in 3 to 5 years will I think be very visibly obsolete. There's new stuff coming out all the time, and so what we're finding is that we think the refresh cycle is going to get a little bit out of sync, and this is really important because what we have to do then is we have to think of some of these rooms almost as like a refresh and then a half refresh or a quarter refresh. So we think about how easy is it going to be to do a component swap in a year in a room that we really want to not have to touch completely. in 3 to 5 years. Or we work with our OEMs to ask, what's the upgrade path for this design? Right now, this camera does XYZ. What's the firmware plan for it? How is it going to function a year or two from now? Can we do that all invisibly? Are there accessories that you're going to be offering for it that'll bump it up? Or in some cases, is the device cost effective enough right now that we could just take it out and swap in something else
Mhm.
without having to take the whole room apart? So we sort of have to think a couple steps ahead with AI, but ultimately we're trying to stick to that 3 to 5 year cadence for having to do the entire room.
So if customers want
Um,
to start now, so that's the second part of the question. If they
yeah,
want to start now, how and where do they start? And fun thing, someone's asking, could one utilize the Jupiter 105-inch display in
yeah.
this space? I bet you we don't see his or her name, but I bet you it's somebody from Jupiter. We
We
saw
have a
this setup.
Jupiter.
That's
Yeah,
why
we
it's
saw this
not.
setup at ISC. Yeah, we saw this
Yeah,
setup at
we have
ISC,
a
and it's
Jupiter at the
amazing.
Hive. We love it. It's a
It
really
is.
really
It is
it's
stunning,
a
isn't it?
It is
Right?
stunning.
yeah. Yeah, if that person is from Jupiter, my question back would be, can we get it for less than $15,000?
Yeah.
Because that's
Yikes.
the limit. It's the retail on it is twice the cost of the whole room. We put it in a couple of executive spaces, and it gets rave reviews. I mean, it's a strong product. It's just a little spendy right now for when you compare it to projection. So where do they start? So there's really there's kind of a continuum of where you can start. And I don't have a whiteboard here, so I'll use my hands here to sort of illustrate this line, right? So in any organization, even in Microsoft, you have stuff that's sort of like at the low end of the experience, right? You might have rooms that still have just speakerphones and nothing else. And so taking those rooms and upgrading them to Teams, right? Just software alone, it kind of brings you up. Then you can go software plus hardware. So a little bit of a better camera, a larger display, and that brings that end up a little bit. So what you want to do is you want to try to bring up your across your organization, across your portfolio. You want to try to bring up everything up to a certain minimum. And for us, the minimum is Teams enablement, right? Having an
Mhm.
MTR in the room, one touch joint, that sort of thing. As you do that, you also look at your higher end spaces. Higher end spaces might be customer facing, they might be executive facing. These are the rooms, these are the hero rooms that really represent you as an organization, and you want to bring those up as well. And so the whole movement is sort of like you sort of want to rise everything up like this. You want to accelerate the work on your rooms that are a little bit behind, and then you also want to marshal your dollars carefully for some of the higher end spaces. That's sort of our approach, and that's that way you don't end up over investing at the high end while leaving some of your other users behind, because what that does is it broadens that experience consistency gap. Our goal at Microsoft is that the meeting experience, well, the meeting join experience anyway, is exactly the same and feels the same for an intern in a conversation room as it does for our CEO in the boardroom. It's essentially the same
Mhm.
thing. The devices will be different, and they'll be a little higher end in one than the other, but ultimately it's we want that same consistency.
And Michelle, I
Okay.
think that goes back to Graham's question as well. I mean, Matthew, I think we have to be clear about it. Enhanced meeting rooms are not for every single space. And
Yeah,
even
they're
here at
not.
Microsoft, we don't see it as every single space. We are
Correct.
doing other meeting types. While it does take a lot of the conversation, it is the thing that everybody wants to do. Yeah, it's not the de facto across the entire organization at this point.
That's exactly right. It's not a replacement. That's a really important point. The EMR that we looked at there, that fits into our medium room standard, and we're not swapping out all medium rooms. We're actually probably going to be somewhere between 5 and 10%
Yeah.
Mhm.
of the ones that we convert. There is still um, there's still a business need for traditional rooms. And in those rooms, we're investing more in the software, the hardware, maybe not so much the furniture. The EMR represents software, hardware, furniture, and physical space. So you've really got those four levers that you can pull: software, hardware, furniture, physical space. But you can make a difference with any of those. And for I don't know what the exact proportion is, but for every one EMR that you put in, where you touch everything, you can put in or refresh a handful of traditional spaces as well.
Right. Yeah. Let's take one more before we do that. Let's take this one. Um, Joan is asking. I know it's dangerous to ask. Is front row supporting Zoom and WebEx, and what would it look like? Same as the meeting room. Do you have your megaphone there, Jimmy?
I do.
I have one too. So let me start. Front row is just a layout. It is just a layout. And then I think my answer would be, and correct me if I'm wrong, ask Zoom and WebEx. Right? So we use whatever they offer, and yes, we work with both Zoom and WebEx to make the best experience on Teams rooms. But if you want a front row type of solution, you need to talk to Zoom and to WebEx.
And I think the basis of what we sort of joke about it, it's just a layout, but the basis is, Matthew, here at Microsoft, we are a typical user where a majority of our meetings are Teams meetings. Yes, we do get Zoom invites. Yes, we do get WebEx invites, and that's the offhand meeting where we can go in and we can still have that meeting. We may not have the exact same feature enhanced solution that we have with the front row side, but you can still have that meeting. And I think it goes towards your point. Having that meeting is the most important part of what that technology does.
Just having that experience and kind of forgetting about the room,
Yeah. Okay. So this is really the last one.
You said that last time, Michelle,
we
too.
have so many great questions. I like this one, and then there's one there that I'll take to wrap this all up. Kelvin is saying, could expandable LED panels serve as perfect alternatives for a projector?
Yeah. Well, by expandable LED panels, I assume that Kelvin's talking about a video wall, like a planar system.
I think so.
Yes. The answer is yes, and in fact, we're building one right now. It's obviously it's going to be in a very high touch space. We can't. That's not a cost issue. You're looking at a healthy six figures for one of those things. But absolutely, we're building it, and it is an alternative. There's few enough of them at Microsoft that it's not even a standard. It's more of a custom installation, but it's amazing. I mean, when you see, it's infinitely scalable, and it looks gorgeous. But yeah, we're doing it, and we're looking at every kind of display technology that is available.
And I have friends at Planar. Laney, I'm looking at you. They'll be very happy that you mentioned them as well. So as every brand is when we mention them with front row, I mean, so many are attaching themselves to this layout. So
yeah. Our team had a visit. I didn't attend, but we had a visit down to Planar in Oregon a few months ago, and came away with some really great knowledge.
Absolutely.
So Matthew, thanks so much for doing this. Looking at the interaction, the people loved it as well. So so thanks again, and we would love to have you back in a couple of months, then see what you came up with and what we can learn from that.
There's good things coming.
There's good things coming.
Lots coming. Yeah.
Joe is asking about the previously mentioned badges. Where and what training resources are available to end users versus resellers? There is an end user training coming, I've heard. We're working on it. So that should be released very soon. Now, if you are a partner and you have passed both the technical badge and the sales badge, what we need you to do is we need you to go to Expert Zone, take a screenshot of both of your badges, including your name, send that to me on LinkedIn. And for now, this is only for folks in Europe. And we count UK as Europe still, so that's okay. If you're in the UK, you can send it to me as well. Even after Brexit. Even after Brexit, yeah. So send it to me. Send it to me, and I'll give you a link to a special website, and we'll have a small gift for you. So send me the screenshot of this page to my LinkedIn account, and then I'll send you a link for something special. This was a fun one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
you need to get your badge. Well, we'll make sure you get one of those gifts as well. We'll send it out to the US just for you
Cool.
and for Jimmy as well, because Jimmy, you need to be taken care of
I
course.
do, I do.
I want that megaphone.
Right?
Yeah, yeah. We want the megaphone now.
I got it. It's
Thanks
how
so
I
much.
emphasize my points, Matthew. When people don't listen, I need to emphasize.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe. Usually you do this part, Jimmy, but
I do.
make sure
You know, hit that like button, subscribe, make sure that we know about you.
thanks everybody, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
guys.